Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video I'm going to have a look at all the werewolf movies in my collection. So this is probably going to be a two-part video. I've got quite a few movies and I'm not going to go into detail into them. I'm just going to sort of let you know what I think and just kind of let you know if they're worth checking out or not. So we'll get to it. The first movie is arguably the greatest werewolf movie ever made, and that is An American Werewolf in London. So the perfect combination of horror and comedy. Really excellent movie and some of the greatest special effects you'll ever see. If any of you saw my Oscar winning horror films video, you might remember that this has Oscar winning special effects. So I'm sure you've all seen this one anyway, but great movie to start with. Right, the next movie is Battle Dogs. So this one's very CGI heavy, but I thought it was pretty enjoyable. This is about like a werewolf outbreak that breaks out in an airport terminal, and the army have to get involved, and it's like the army versus this growing population of werewolves. It's okay, like I say, very silly, very heavy on the CGI, but entertaining enough. I thought it was alright. Next up, we have The Beast Must Die from Amicus. Pretty decent. I haven't seen this for a long time, but I remember enjoying it. I don't think it was one of Amicus's best, but still an enjoyable film. Next movie is Big Bad Wolf. This one, I don't remember too much about this one, but I do remember enjoying it, and I think the werewolf and some of the effects in it were really cool. Next movie is Blood and Chocolate. This one was a really interesting film. I enjoyed this one. This is about this young woman that falls in love with this guy, but the woman is related to, like, she's part of this like werewolf lineage, and she has like these werewolf ancestors, and it's like about the kind of the troubles that brings. It's basically Romeo and Juliet with werewolves, which I really enjoyed. So I can recommend Blood and Chocolate. I was pleasantly surprised by that one. The next movie is Blood Moon. This is about someone who is a werewolf, and he gets a job in like a travelling circus. It's been a long time since I've seen it. This one's a very popular film. I wasn't too fussed on it at the time, but I have only seen it the once, and it was a long time ago. So that's Blood Moon. The next movie is Bone Hill Road. Now this one has some really good aspects to it. The plot for the film does kind of meander around a little bit, and there's a strong focus on like this guy who kidnaps women and keeps them in his house. And for me, the movie focused on that a bit too much rather than the werewolves. When the werewolves come into it, they look fantastic and it's really good. It just seemed to take a long time to get to the werewolf part of the movie. But still an okay film. Right, next up is The Boy Who Cried Werewolf. This is like a little TV movie from the 70s. It's not that great, to be honest. Very tame stuff, and really not that effective. The werewolf in it, he kind of runs around like a teenage delinquent rather than an intimidating werewolf. There's no kind of threat to him at all. And whenever the werewolf attacks, it seems to play this kind of strange upbeat music which doesn't quite go with the film. I think if you watched this kind of in the early 70s when you were younger, this movie would definitely have a nostalgic charm to it, but I didn't, and it didn't really do a lot for me. It was entertaining in places, but yeah, really not much to write about. Was that one? Right, next up is The Company of Wolves. Neil Jordan's fantastic take on the Red Riding Hood legend, giving it a real dark horror twist. I really like this film. I think it's quite underrated, and it does have the scene with the wolf coming out of the guy's mouth, which is fantastic. So yeah, I can recommend Company of Wolves. Next up is Hammer Horror's Curse of the Werewolf. Got this last month, showed it in my last update. Really enjoyed this film, really good Hammer film, still holds up well to this day. Great werewolf makeup and everything like that. So yeah, definitely one that I can recommend. Next up is Cursed. Don't remember this one. Can't even remember if I liked it or not. I think it was okay, but I can't really say too much about what it was like or the effects or anything like that. Right, next movie is Dark Wolf. Now this movie gets a lot of hate. I don't think I've ever seen a positive review for this film. I thought it was okay. I got some entertainment out of it, but it does have maybe the worst CGI effects I've ever seen in a film. So the werewolf and the werewolf transformation scenes are really, really bad, like painstakingly bad. So if you do want to check this movie out, just be aware that the CGI in it is awful. Okay, next up is Dog Soldiers. One of the best movies on this list. I know this is a really popular film. A lot of people like this. Very entertaining. Has some great comedy aspects to it. The werewolves look fantastic. The setting's fantastic. So if you've not seen Dog Soldiers, I highly recommend checking out this movie. Okay, next up is Full Moon High. This is like a bit of a horror comedy. This high school kid, he gets bitten by a werewolf and then he starts to turn into a werewolf in inconvenient times, that kind of thing. Trying to think, it's been a while since I've seen this one, but I enjoyed it. Nothing too spectacular. I think the werewolf's not too bad looking in it, but it is more of like a comedy rather than a scary horror film. Right, next up is The Fury of the Wolfman, which I don't remember too much about this one, but I know it's Paul Naschy. So if you're not familiar with Paul Naschy, he was a Spanish actor, I believe, and he made a lot of horror films, but he was mostly renowned for his werewolf movies. So if it's a werewolf movie with Paul Naschy, it's definitely worth checking out. It's usually a great example of Euro cinema. So although I don't remember this one too much, I do remember his werewolves are always really cool looking. I always like his werewolves, so definitely worth checking out just to see that. Next movie, another fantastic film, is Gingersnaps. Again, one of the best werewolf movies that I've seen. I really like this. The story of these two teenage girls, and one of them becomes a werewolf, and they have to deal with that. Really excellent film. I highly recommend Gingersnaps. Right, the next movie is Howl. I've seen this one get quite decent reviews, but if I'm honest, I didn't particularly enjoy this one all that much. I thought it was really slow. I just remember it being very, very slow and not really seeing much of the werewolf or anything like that. It all takes place on a train, but I can't quite remember what the story is, but very slow in my opinion. I struggled to get into that one. Right, next up, possibly my favourite film on this video is The Howling. I'm sure we all know this one, very famous film. Again, it's got some of the best werewolf transformation scenes that I've ever seen. This one came out around the same time as American Werewolf, and I think it might go under the radar a little bit in terms of the effects and things like that, but this one has some really good things going on in the film. I love the setting of the rehabilitation clinic centre kind of place, but it being full of werewolves. That's really, really cool. So if you've not seen The Howling, that is highly recommended. And the next one is The Howling 2, a film that gets a lot of hate, but I rather enjoyed it. I think you have to know straight away this is nothing like The Howling. Whereas The Howling was a serious film, this is like a very much kind of tongue-in-cheek 80s not comedy film, but it doesn't take itself seriously. It's a completely different movie. But I was able to get enjoyment out of it. I really like the 80s-ness of it. I think later on in the film they go to like Transylvania, and that's really, really cool. And you've got Christopher Lee battling werewolves, which, you know, is as cool as it sounds. So it gets a lot of hate, but I have to say I enjoyed The Howling too. Check it out if you like sort of your cheesy 80s movies. Next up is I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Really enjoyable film from the 50s. This young man, for some reason, his doctor starts to experiment on this serum with him, and it turns him into a werewolf, really. So he's running around 50s suburbia as a werewolf. It's really cool. Next up is Legend of the Werewolf with Peter Cushing. Pretty decent film. I thought this one was okay. It's not a Hammer film, but it has that kind of feel to it, and you know, Peter Cushing always brings his charm to the film, so I enjoyed it. I don't remember too much about the werewolf or what it's like or how much screen time it gets, but I remember it being an okay film. Right, next up, from the 40s, this one I couldn't quite remember, is the Mad Monster. So George Zucco does some strange experiments on Glenn Strange, who plays like this kind of gentle giant, really kind of simple-minded guy, but the effects of the experimentations turn him into this mad monster creature. So again, he runs around as this werewolf, killing people, and has to be stopped. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a pretty enjoyable film from the 40s. Not too bad. And the last one for part one is The Monster Squad. Excellent film, one of the best horror films from the 80s. I included this because it does have the Wolfman character in it, who looks really cool and gets lots of screen time and has a pretty decent role in the film. So that's going to be part one of this video. I hope you got one or two decent recommendations from that. Stay tuned for part two. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon with more werewolf movies.